Hey, hello, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of getting students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I work at IE Business School Publishing, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials.
And today we have somebody fantastic. We have David Mullich. David, are you prepared to engage?
I'm as prepared as I'll ever be, I think.
Good to know. So, well, to give you a quick intro to David, he has been designing entertainment and educational products for companies like Activision, Age of Learning, Disney, EduWare Services, Encyclopedia Britannica. I wondered, I was never sure if that still existed or not. So you'll probably tell us a bit more about that. Mattel and the Spin Master for Toy Company over 3 decades. In the recent years, he has also focused on applying game design techniques to academia and business. David has served as an industry mentor at the USC GamePipe Lab and co-created the Boy Scouts of America Game Design Merit Badge, and earlier this year was ranked 4th leading gamification guru in social media. He's lectured and led workshops on game design, gamification, and game thinking at the annual Game Developers Conference, Game Thinking Live, Loyola Marymount University, New York Film Academy, and the USC Institute for Multimedia Literacy. David currently leads the Los Angeles Film School's Game Production Degree Program and serves as the Education and Research Director for the International Game Developers Association's Los Angeles chapter. And, of course, he consults with educational and business clients on how to make their projects more engaging. So, David, is there anything we missed from that intro? Anything you want to comment on?
Boy, that sounds like I covered quite a bit. I think anything more would just bore your audience. So let's go with that as an overview.
Fantastic, David. So the first quick question I did have is about Encyclopedia Britannica. Does that still exist?
You know what? I don't know. I worked for Encyclopedia Britannica about 25 years ago. And they were, at the time, I was working on a platform called CDI Interactive, which actually no longer exists. In fact, it didn't last very long at all. But I was working for a company that did CDI products, and they wanted to take their encyclopedia and put it onto an interactive platform, and they chose CDI. So I worked with them on developing games for it. But what they've done since, I'm sure Encyclopedia Britannica is still around. Probably, in fact, they may even still be putting out their books for libraries, but I think it's more readily available. I seem to recall an Encyclopedia Britannica website still around that I think you have to subscribe to in order to get the information on it.
Interesting, very interesting.
But hopefully they're still around. You can't rely just on Wikipedia.
Oh, for sure.
For getting your information, maybe something more peer reviewed is essential at times.
Absolutely. So, David, let's get started with the first question I'd like to make to guests when we start. And that's, what does a regular day with you look like?
Well, my days actually alternate between teaching days and non-teaching days. As you mentioned before, at the Los Angeles Film School, I run the game production degree program, and I personally teach classes in game design, in game mechanics, and pitching product proposals. And what the way the school's set up, our terms are 4 weeks long, and students usually take 1 class per term. So they'll take a 6-hour class every other day. So on teaching days, I teach for 6 hours, from 8:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon, and then follow up with students afterwards. And that's pretty much my whole day. On the days I'm not teaching, I'm either preparing for the next class or I do consulting work. And that my consulting work varies quite a bit. It might involve me working with clients who are from afar, and they'll send me materials to look at online, and I'll look at and comment on. Other clients I've worked at, I've gone on site and worked with them on site. And I've done other things. I've been an expert witness in intellectual property cases, and occasionally, beyond just gamification, I actually work on games themselves and help out with game design.
That's very, very, very interesting. So your experience is very, very well geared towards what we look for here. And we're especially focused, as you probably know, in education and gamification in general. So the next thing that we would like to know, David, is for you to tell us a story of what we would like to call your favorite failure when creating games or gamification. Something that perhaps sets you up for future learning and future success. What's that story?
Well, there's probably multiple stories there. I'll give you a more general case. Whenever I work with clients, the biggest failure comes when when the client has an expectation that gamification or making their products more engaging is all about just dropping in some pre-existing platform for doing points, leaderboards, and badges, which is actually the worst form of gamification out there. I mean, it does have some use, but it only appeals to a very narrow degree of the things that motivate people. They're all extrinsic rewards, whereas intrinsic rewards are even more powerful motivators. And so to really do gamification right, it requires actually looking at what it is that they want, the client wants their users to do, what is the journey that they have in mind for them, and figuring out what is going to motivate their different users to go on that journey, and how do we eliminate obstacles that they encounter along the way. And that's not what a lot of my clients expect. And when they come in just wanting, some simple drop-in solution, that usually leads to the project failing. What it really involves, and my more successful clients understand this, it involves sitting down. It's a long-term approach. It's analyzing the product as it's being developed and looking at it along the way. First at the very beginning, figuring out who their customers are. What motivates their customers? Why are they using this product? What outcomes they're trying to achieve? And then looking at what it is what are the mechanics? What are the actions the users are doing in this product or program, and figuring out where the fun is, or removing the unfun parts on it. So it's a continual process, and it involves looking at a product in a variety of different ways to figure out how to appeal to the different motivations of users. And if unless clients are open to this, usually they're not going to get a satisfactory results. So I've had some very successful working relationships with clients, and a couple where very early on it's apparent that I'm not going to be able to provide them what they're looking for, which is a simple one-stop shop. I mean, there are companies out there where they can purchase a points, badges, and leaderboard system and plug it in, and if that's what they want, they can get that. That's not what I provide. I provide much deeper analysis and solutions for their problems.
Interesting, David. So here, actually, you jumped a bit ahead into one of the future questions, which is about if you follow any process when you use gamification or you use these game design strategies for solving a problem. And that's very interesting. But I'm going to nudge you a little bit more. And I would like you to tell us the story of one of those clients that maybe one time was having those expectations and said, look, David, what I want is points, badges, and leaderboards. And for some reason, you said, well, I'm interested in this client. And you went on ahead. And what happened there? Why was that so bad, and what did you do to maybe come back from that?
There was a client I worked for.
You don't need to name any names.
Good, because I'm going to be vague on the details, because I don't want to give anyone a bad reputation.
Please.
So it was a case. It was for a online retail website that was looking to. They brought me on because they wanted to gamify that website without really understanding what gamification is. And it was a product they were in the early stages of developing, so much so they didn't even have a clear idea of what they wanted to do. Yet they brought me on at the very beginning to gamify it. So what I decided to do was kind of give them a general tutorial on what gamification was and the different approaches that one could apply. And so I went away, prepared, did a nice presentation for them, came back and to deliver the presentation, hoping to deliver it to the entire team instead it was just the person managing the team. So I delivered kind of a more generic overview of what gamification is, and my client was dissatisfied because they thought I'd come in with a solution for them. In which case, I told them I can't give you a solution without you telling me what your product is, because they really didn't tell me much about the product other than it was a shopping product.
No details, hard to come by a solution, right?
They hadn't developed it. They were working on the details, but they hadn't come up with it. So they needed to have done either two things. One, brought me in after they had come up with a process so that I could analyze it and figure out how to strengthen it, or brought me in to have me work on the design with them of the process, rather than just coming in without knowing anything about what they're doing and come up with a one solution fit all gamification process. Because there is no such thing.
I've seen this over and over again. People expecting something that it's just like completely general that works for everybody, and there are platforms out there that are offering this sort of solution. What I'm not entirely convinced of is of the effectiveness, and I think you'll agree with me on this, because if it's generic, it's not designed for your users, and if it's not designed for your users, then chances are that they might not be interested in what you're showing them.
They can be temporarily effective for a certain type of user who are motivated by achievement, and that's about it.
Yeah.
There's a much broader range of motivations and other things that can be used that can bring about much more long-term engagement. But yeah, a true gamification. In fact, let's call it game thinking, because that's that's something that involves a broader philosophy. Is constantly iterating on the design of your product so that you increase engagement. It's not a one-time drop-in solution.
Absolutely. So, David, I wanted to bring up, for me, the main learning I got from your story is to really deeply understand, first off, what your client is really expecting, and then to be able to manage those expectations. Whatever your client is, in maybe in an educational setting, it could be an administrator or similar, or it could be an actual client. But the important thing is to understand and manage those expectations. Is there anything else you'd like to bring up?
It also involves educating them, because a lot come in with only vague notions of what gamification, game thinking resources can bring in for them. They'll hear the term and think it is, again, just a drop-in app, a plug-in that you put in, and it's really not. It's a strategy. Yeah. It's a strategy for increasing engagement that you apply to your design methodology. It's not just a plug-in. And so it involves educating them. Some people don't want to be educated, though. And that's always a problem. Being a contractor, I've encountered this. Companies that have been brought into companies I've worked on have encountered this before, where a contractor will be brought in, and the client already has a solution in mind. They just want validation of that solution rather than coming in with new ideas, and new ideas that are even more appropriate. So a lot of times it involves not just understanding what a client wants, but testing them, challenging them on what they think their solution is. In fact, even testing them on what they think their problem is. They know what they want to achieve, hopefully. They know who their customers are, hopefully. If not, you have to help them with that. But getting their customers persuaded to do what they want the customers to do, that's where it can sometimes take challenges in getting the client to rethink the potential solution. And that's probably the hardest part of a consultant's task, is challenging and teaching and actually apply game thinking to the client themselves.
That's an interesting idea. So, David, I want to move to the next question, and it's about, now we're taking a 180-degree spin and asking you, what is the biggest challenge that you've faced and actually solved using game thinking?
You know what? Probably the biggest challenge I face is in education, And the reason why is that the difference between games and education, it's been said that those who say that fun and education, there's no difference between them. But there is one. We play games because we want to play them. And often people are in school because they have to be. It's not because they want to be. So making education more game-like is a big challenge. And if you do it awkwardly, if you apply those extrinsic motivators, then what you're doing is what's called chocolate-covered broccoli. You're taking something that inherently isn't fun and just adding a fun layer on top of it. No, the challenge is in actually finding fun in the activity. And where I've been successful at that, it involves going and looking at what are the different things that motivate students or motivate people in general, and making it more fun. And some of them are very simple things that I've applied. For example, in assignments, people like to be in control of their own learning and what they do. They want a feeling of empowerment. What I try to do when I give assignments is at least give multiple choice assignments so that students feel a power of ownership and control over what it is they're learning. Rather than just being the recipient of information, they have at least some choice in what they're doing. Other things I do.
They choose their own assignment.
Yeah, I'll give them a multiple choice, potential options about what to do to satisfy the learning requirements, and hopefully they're very different types of assignments to appeal to people who have different learning processes. Another thing I'll do is I'll try to incorporate more storytelling into the assignment themselves, rather than just giving dry lectures. So what it's been discovered that when people listen to stories, different parts of their brains activated, and that when we're listening to stories, dopamine, the chemical dopamine, is released into the brain, which is the chemical that gives pleasure to it. And it's been found that people, when they're listening to a story, have much longer retention than just simply facts and retaining facts and figures. If there can be added an emotional component to the experience, they're much more likely to retain the information behind it. So what I look to do is try to put in a story element into what I'm teaching, and sometimes that involves role playing. So, for example, I was teaching class about how to give pitches and put together presentations and proposals for potential clients. And one session was about delivering an elevator pitch. So what I did is I took the students out of the classroom and I gave them a scenario that they had a game idea that they wanted to pitch to a potential publisher, and they were attending a gaming convention. And they were at that hotel the morning of going down to the convention. When they got into the elevator, suddenly they heard a voice call out, "Stop, hold the elevator," and in walks in the president of Electronic Arts. You have that 30-second elevator ride to give your pitch. And so what we did is we had someone play the president of Electronic Arts, and we went to an actual elevator in the school. We went to the 8th floor, walked in, and then on the 7th floor had someone get in who was a president, and each one had turns giving their pitch, and they had to complete their pitch in that elevator ride. So they had to make sure that they had a well-crafted pitch that could be told in a short amount of time, yet still cover all the essential details of their game. Then afterwards, what we did was we had all the other students who could fit on the elevator listen to the pitch, and they had a limited number of business cards each. So we took elevator rides with each student. So there were more students than there were business cards. So we had students give out business cards only if they liked the pitch. And then at the end, after all the students went through and all the business cards had been given out, awarded extra credits to the students who had the most business cards. So it was a way of teaching about giving pitches in kind of a realistic situation, but there was a story element added. The fact that they were in a real elevator and in a scenario made it feel more like role playing, and I guarantee you that experience was much more memorable to them, and they took away the lessons with greater retention than they would have if they just listened to a dry lecture and maybe written out an elevator lecture on a piece of paper. So that's the sort of thing I try to do in my classroom in order to applying game theory to a tough situation, which is teaching students who would rather be home playing games or going out to the park or going to the movies.
That sounds fantastic, David. That was a very, very interesting example of what you do in your everyday classes, and that's absolutely fantastic. That's the kind of thing that I strive for, that I'm invoking the engagers to go for. Those are simple things. As you could hear David, you didn't hear David saying that he developed an app. You didn't hear David spending millions of dollars or euros in developing something or creating something technological super complicated. He just thought about the motivations, how to make things more interesting for the students, and that's the result. That's the in his case what worked for him. He has tested it out. It's worked fantastically, and I'm sure he'll use it again.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to. I'm always looking at all my lessons to figure out a way to present the material in a much more engaging way that's much more meaningful to my students, and then I try to also carry that forward into my work with clients.
That's fantastic. So, David, you went through your process previously. So, I would just like a quick recap of what does the process of gamifying, either for your clients or even better for a classroom. How does that process look like?
Well, I'll tell you, for a long time, having developed games over 3 decades, I kind of developed a process intuitively that I couldn't really articulate until I happened to meet Amy Jo Kim, who is another gamification expert who I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with. And I attended her game thinking workshops.
Oh, that's
and
fantastic.
Actually wound up being a coach in her Game Thinking Live event last year, and she really helped me articulate what the steps are that we game designers normally use, but probably don't really think about what our process was. And she articulated a process that really explains very well how we as game designers go about it. And it's an 8-step process. The first step of which is, first of all, clarifying what it is that you're actually trying to achieve in your project, whether it's an application or a program or a teaching process. What is the actual outcome that you're trying to achieve? Then next, in order to get feedback on what you're trying to achieve, you have to identify what Amy Jo Kim calls your super fans. Those people who are most motivated to be one of your users. These are the people who have an urgent need and pressing need for what it is that you're trying to achieve, and probably has done a lot of research on their own about other alternative solutions to their problem. These are the people that can give you the best feedback on what you're trying to do. Then after interviewing them, what you do is identify what their habits and needs are. And not just getting their overall need, but specifically what it is they're looking for. And then what do they in whatever it is that you're trying to achieve with them, what is their normal habits related to going about it? So if they're interested in, let's see, finding a good restaurant, well, how do they go about finding restaurants? What food are they interested in? What are their dietary needs? And what is it that they, what websites do they consult when finding new restaurants? So look at what their habits are. And then once you've collected your information, really put all the insights you've gathered into a design-ready form. And this involves the use of putting your design thinking into job stories, in which you present a situation that you're trying to come up with a solution for. What is the user's motivation in that situation? What is it that really gets them to be interested in the situation and go through the struggle of trying to resolve it? So what motivates them? Are they people that are interested in achievements, which points, leaderboards, and badges will work? Or are they more interested in empowerment? Are they interested in storytelling? Are they interested in social interaction with other people? Are they interested in meaningfulness, being a better person or helping the world be a better place? And then finally, what is the expected outcome that you're trying to achieve with the solution? Then the next step is to identify their entire journey throughout your application or program. Because when starting something new, your users are newbies. They're getting introduced to your what it is, your program or your product for the very first time. They're not very skilled in it, and they're kind of testing it to figure out if that's right for them. Once they start figuring out whether or not it's right for them and they understand what it is, they start using it more and more, and then they become habit builders. They start using it regularly, in which case they start learning everything you can do in that and in the program. And if they keep at it, then they become finally your expert users. And these are your most enthusiastic users, the ones that are most likely to be your best salespeople, to get more people to try it out. And in that case, you have to go find out what it is that what you can introduce into your product or program, where they can really become experts at it and start teaching other people about how to use it and what's cool about it. The next step is identifying what are the core activities that you're actually doing in your program or product. What is the main action that you're doing over and over and over throughout the gamified experience? What is your motivation for doing that action? And then what is the reward for achieving that action? There's usually one activity, whether it's if your activity is about designing greeting cards, then what is the basic action in designing a greeting card? If your activity is about some kind of training situation, well, what is the action that you're trying to train them on? Then what you do, once you've come up with your entire plan, what their journey is, what the core learning loop is, what the outcome is, do a minimum viable product and test it with early customers, and really get feedback on whether or not what your approach is actually satisfying their needs. And then finally validate everything overall. Use metrics. Never rely on emotions to determine whether or not you've achieved success. Don't rely on feeling, you know what, this really seems like a great product. Actually sit down and try it. Try to come up with a way of measuring by numbers whether or not you've achieved the results you wanted. You know, those numbers might be how many people have tried your app and actually gone all the way through the end, or maybe more qualitative. Have the people rate it, whether or not they felt it was useful to participate in this experience, and validate your strategy. And if you're not getting the results you want, then you have to go back and analyze and figure out what you need to improve things. So those are kind of the 8 basic steps that we in game design use to making sure games are fun, and these are ones that Amy Jo Kim identified can be applied to any sort of experience, even outside of games, for developing. And that's pretty much what I've learned to follow when developing either games or any type of gamified experience.
Wow, that's a very, very complete process. So thank you, David, and thank you, of course, Amy, which we hope to have in the show sometime soon.
You should. She's a great resource.
Yes, definitely. Actually, when you guys were getting set up for your game thinking, I'm not sure what the program was called. It was kind
Game
of a
Thinking
workshop.
Live.
I was on her. I am on her email list, and I saw you guys, and part of what she gave out for free, which was actually as well a lot shorter, which was what I had time to consume. I made an article of what were my conclusions for education from that material, and it got a bit of attention as well. It was a pretty interesting situation. Yeah. So we're now going to go, David, into the second section of this interview, and here we're very interested as well in the story, if there is one. But in general, these are less of a story and more maybe of a tool, a tip, maybe a tactic, or something very specific that you could say that the audience could take from your experience and your knowledge. So the first one is, if there's anything that you could say. Of course, points, badges, and leaderboards is not going to be that thing. If there's anything that you could say is a best practice or something that you could think that any game thinking project could benefit from.
Yeah, it's really understanding your target user very well. It's identifying your target user of your app or program, and figuring out what motivates them. Don't think just purely about achievements. Think about anything from creativity to empowerment to social connectiveness, learning, self-improvement. What are the more intrinsic rewards to the experience, and then also looking at some of the kind of the pain points in what you're developing, the things that are kind of less fun, to figure out how to make that less painful if there are any ways to get around them. So, gamification techniques have been used by decades. We've all encountered them, whether we realized it or not. My mom used to collect here in the United States, when she went shopping, blue chip stamps, and if you collect enough stamps, you can exchange them for rewards, actually physical products. So you get a return. And we've all experienced limited time discounts. You have a two-week sale that you have to hurry in, so it appeals to scarcity as a motivator. Loyalty rewards programs that also you feel you have to redeem those points. So you're worried about loss aversion in that case. Those techniques have been used for years, and that's what a lot of gamification is. But even more potent gamification is, again, finding out what's intrinsically engaging about the activity you want people to do, and really highlighting that in ways that and expressing that to them in ways that they can relate to. So it's both understanding the activity you're trying to get people to do very well, what's cool about it, and what it is that really motivates your users.
Certainly, and in that same motivational speech, I would like to know, which is your favorite game?
My favorite game of all time is Civilization. That's Sid Meier's game about building a civilization. And what I really like about it, in addition to it be really well designed, it is probably the best example of a game in which that's built upon the concept of just one more turn. I just want to go and play this game for one more turn, because the what we call the engagement flow of the game, in which the difficulty, the challenges ramps up equally with your skill level in the game. So you're tested. You feel fairly tested. Whether you're a newbie or an expert in the game, just makes you feel like you can succeed always at the next step. So you want to do that next step to progress even further and further. That was a extremely well designed game, but also learned a lot about history in playing this game. So it wasn't chocolate covered broccoli. It was really finding about the connections between historical events and inventions, especially in society. It identified the coolness factor of history and really played that up.
Absolutely.
So it was a great example of being both great game design as well as really identifying what's cool about the subject matter.
Absolutely, and that's a very interesting game. So the next thing that we would like to know is, apart from David, of course, which is right now being interviewed, is there somebody you would like to listen to interviewed in this podcast, in Professor Game?
In the future?
Yes.
Oh, additional people. Well, we mentioned Amy Jo Kim.
Yeah.
As someone that you should be talking to. Other
Definitely.
people that I follow, two other gamification experts that are really important. Yukai Chao.
Yeah, that was actually the first guest. Yes.
Oh, he was great.
Yes.
Actually,
episode 1. This is episode 26. That was episode 1. So yes, Yukai Chao, I think he'll probably be a repeat guest at some point as well.
He actually came and lectured at one of my classes.
Wow.
He was kind enough. He was visiting the Los Angeles area and was very kind enough to come down and to speak to my students. All right, someone else who you probably also have, Andrei Marchuski.
Yes, I know him personally, but he hasn't been interviewed, so this could be another nudge for him.
Well, you should do that. He's also someone who's been very helpful to me. He's developed these gamification cards.
Yeah, and the player types as well.
Right, and identify player types. And I've been fortunate enough to be a test subject for his cards, and I've used them in my own classroom to teach students about gamification.
Fantastic.
So you've already had
those are very good recommendations.
Andre and Amy Jo, great people to have in your program.
Absolutely fantastic. So is there any book that you would like to recommend to the audience, David?
Well, since I mentioned these people, Amy Jo Kim, her book, she just came out with the Game Thinking Playbook, which is all about how to build really deep customer engagement into your product design using techniques from game designers. You can go to her Game Thinking website and probably order it, or probably from Amazon. And since we also talked about Andre, about a year ago, he came up with a book called
Even Ninja Monkeys Like to Play.
Even Ninja Monkeys Like to Play, which describes his own gamification strategies, and that's a really good book that I enjoy.
Yeah.
A more general book about game design, probably the textbook on game design, Jesse Schill's The Art of Game Design, A Book of Lenses, which covers not just how to analyze your players and figuring out what motivates them, but also covers a wide range of techniques for building up player engagement from a number of different viewpoints, and provides you with a series of lenses or questions to go about analyzing your approaches. And I think a lot of these are not just applicable to games, but also for other types of gamified experiences.
Absolutely. Those are like Bibles in the gamification world for
Absolutely.
sure.
Absolutely.
And David, what is your superpower in gamification? What would you call your sweet spot?
Well, what I do is, my real focus is on looking at the core loop of a game and figuring out how to make it as engaging as possible. And I try to look at all experiences the way I analyze games. And there are 5 things I look at. One is I analyze the difficulty of it, which is what skills are required of the user in order to be successful in using your application or program, and how are they challenged along the way, so that both the user doesn't feel like they're overwhelmed, that they feel that they can be successful, and yet there's still more for them to learn. Then I look at the complexity of it. How much information are you presenting to the player all throughout, or the user throughout the experience? Are you giving them enough that they understand, but not too much that they feel lost at any time? Then I look at the depth of it. How many choices are you giving the player about, or the user about, what to do? Is there enough choices and paths through the program or product that it's worth, that they feel like they're getting a lot out of it? That it's not just a simple experience, something that's obvious, but rather does the user get a deep experience out of using the application? Then I look at replayability. Is there something to discover in the program or the process by using it again and again and again? Is there always something new to learn or discover in it? And finally, I look at pacing. What is the speed at which your user is expected to go through the product or the program? Is it so much that, and this can vary by user type. Some people want a calm, very non-threatening experience. Other people like challenge and excitement. So is the pace at which you're delivering challenges and delivering information at the right speed for that, or pace for that particular user? So these are things we look at in games. I try to take my experience in designing games and apply them to designing other types of experiences. So that's probably my superpower. It's being a game analyst and looking at the success of the actual game design.
Well, your experience and success in the game industry for sure is a big part of your superpower. So David, thank you very much for this interview today. We would like to, before we leave, we would like to know if you have any final piece of advice for our engagers, for the listeners. Then for you to let us know how can we connect with you, and then we'll say game over.
Well, my biggest advice is don't get put off by the term gamification as though it's something real abstract and something that is or even sounds too highfalutin for you. It's just about figuring out what is engaging about your product or program, and really highlighting that for your players or users. The best way to reach me is through my website, davidmullich.com. That's where I post blogs. I try to do it weekly, although I just discovered I'm a little bit behind. I need to catch up on my blogging. You can also follow me on Twitter. I'm at David_Mullich, and not only do I put out probably several times a day, not only links to stuff that I've written, but also stuff that I've curated that I think is useful articles for you to read in doing your own endeavors.
And I've seen you. I'm not sure if you still have it, but you used to place some historical facts about games a while ago.
Still do.
Fantastic.
Every day I put out something historical about what happened in the game world that day.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that one. Thank you very much, David. All of these things that you've mentioned will be mentioned in the show notes page. You'll be able to find it in professorgame.com/podcast/026, because this episode is number 26. Thank you again, David, and we'll see you soon.
Great. Thank you, Rob, and I'll be looking forward to listening to your future podcasts.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Game
Goodbye.
over. Hey, Engagers! Thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast. That was a pretty cool interview with David, and I hope you enjoyed it. And it's been 26 episodes and going strong. Last week, we started a survey to understand you better so we can serve you better. It takes a maximum of 2 minutes, and I would love to get to know you better. So, if you haven't already, please go to professorgame.com/survey25. That's survey, SURVEY, and the number 2525. Thank you in advance, and see you next week.